This is intended to get a little more nitty-gritty around when we talk about implementing cultures of feedback. How do you actually do that? How do you actually start? Yeah, so the first topic is about the link between feedback and performance. As you all know, we have this feedback app, and we've been running it for years now, from very early on till kind of the full boat app that you've been using yourselves. And that's given us this tremendous amount of data, so data from ourselves, data from partner companies. And every time you use it, it basically creates this history for every person. So if the x-axis is time, the y is kind of your score, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have all the actual text and semantic data. And that allows us to do some really interesting things, which is correlate performance to feedback. What is it about feedback? Is there anything about the way that the very top performing individuals and teams use feedback versus the way that the lowest performing teams use it? What's the differences? Can that be parsed apart? And that's really what we're talking about. This is our second rev of what we call the learning index, which is the most effective way that we've found to segment the feedback data. And so everyone at NextJump is segregated into one of these 4 categories every month. And it's basically looking at your month over month kind of feedback numbers. And you get put into one of 4 buckets. This bucket here means your feedback is trending up. So whatever you got last month, you're doing better this month. So that whatever you're doing, keep doing more of that. The second group here is month over month, you're going down. So we're getting whatever we were, 3s and 4s, and now you're getting 1s and 2s. The third bucket you're flat, so you're kind of in maintenance mode, we call it. And the fourth bucket is you're getting little to no feedback. And a bunch of kind of correlations came out of this. The number 1 correlation is this. When we look at people that are in the hiding, leaders that are in the hiding category, they are the worst performers and are leading the worst performing teams. So it's almost like a laser. It's a very, very strong correlation, nearly 1-to-1. That getting a lot of, kind of the way of saying this, getting a lot of feedback doesn't guarantee performance, but not getting feedback guarantees failure. And we see this on an individual level. It's more stark on a leader level. When you're leading a team and you're not getting feedback, the whole team starts doing badly. Because they're mimicking that behavior of not putting themselves out there, not being transparent, not sharing, doing more lying, hiding, faking. All the kind of behaviors that lead to bad performance get mimicked by all the people that are on your team. The second key insight is that high-performing leaders are in both categories on the left, the green buckets, up and down. Our best performing, both individuals and best performing teams, if you look at their feedback, it's up and down. It's kind of like a heartbeat. Why is that? It's because they're actually putting themselves out there. They're trying stuff. They're breaking things. And what we interpret that to mean is they're learning. That if you're up here and you're trying something new and you do maybe what Charlie did yesterday and have an experience and learn from it, that's what you see, where you're getting negative feedback, but then that turns into positive feedback. That is the kind of that heartbeat. That's the essence of learning. The opposite is when you're just like nature. Anything that's alive has like some kind of sinusoidal pattern, but if it's flat, you're dead. And so based on that, we've really made it 2 things at NextJump. We've made it incredibly uncomfortable to hide. So I'll kind of go into it a little later how we do that tactically. But if you're not getting feedback and you are kind of not putting yourselves out there, people know it becomes increasingly socially uncomfortable to do that. The other thing is that we do want people, because it does lead to performance, whether you're getting good feedback or bad feedback, it doesn't matter. We just want you on the field playing. And we've created a whole series of tools. If you log into Perks at Work, this is my team. You can log in and everyone can see everyone's feedback and kind of where they're trending now. But the cool part of that is it leads to all kinds of sort of intervention conversations about, looks like you're trying a bunch of stuff last month and now you're kind of taking a time out. Like, why is that? Or just, you're tired? Is, something going on in your head? What is it? So I think it's led us to have all sorts of conversations about, like preemptive conversations about sort of sustaining performance over time, or burnout, or people that are not it's a terrible thing when you're not growing for an extended period of time. Those people not only are personally miserable, but they hurt the enterprise, and ultimately they'll probably leave. And this type of intelligence just allows you to much more proactively manage a team. So that's kind of our boiling it all of this down. What we've seen in the data is that hiding is bad, getting out in the playing field and trying stuff is good. So, and I think that's sort of intuitive, or it doesn't, I don't think that's controversial. But then it's a lot harder to implement that in reality in an organization than just saying it. And there's really two problem sets that we think of. One is there's an organizational challenge, and the second is that there's a personal challenge. So go into the organizational challenge first. This, so Dr. Keegan, I thought this quote of his was very good, that every organization wants to be high performing, but what if, ironically, the most robust route to high performance is to not have a performance mindset at all? The entrepreneur's favorite mantra, fail fast, fail frequently, fail forward, is usually brought to product development. Next jump is bringing it to people development. How do you take that ethos of the like fail forward, fail fast? If you want to learn stuff, you have to, you gotta do worse before you're gonna get better. Like it applies to, learning math, learning golf, anything, becoming a better leader. And we do think about it from a product development point of view, but not from a kind of an organizational design or people point of view. And research suggests, so we've done a lot of work with feedback researchers. Studi, who's one of, she's a Harvard doctoral candidate. She's in our Boston Academy today. She's working with us on kind of pulling together, like, what does the academic research say about feedback? This is kind of one key theme. That research suggests that individuals will tend to interpret critical feedback on their performance very differently, depending on whether they hold a performance or a learning orientation. If you have a performance orientation, that means I believe right now I'm being graded, and it's like this is going on my permanent record, and this is going to affect my bonus, and this is going to affect where I'm going to get promoted. And 99.9% of organizations are entirely organizationally designed just around a performance orientation. Everything you do goes on your permanent record. Every failure is like a stab in the back. And that leads to what we've talked before about lying, hiding, and faking. The other side of that is how do you create room for a learning orientation? Because if you have a learning orientation, you're more likely to see the feedback as this is the information I need to do better. When you're a coach, when you're practicing tennis or something, when my coach is giving me tips, I don't feel like, oh my God, why are you telling me that? You want that information. But unfortunately, we kind of designed our organization so that there's lots and lots of this and very little room for a learning orientation. We may have shared this earlier, but when we think practically what that leads to at companies is, or any organization, is a lot of lying, hiding, faking. We use the term eggshells a lot, which are kind of like unstated things. I can look down the hall here and I can see, people I don't really want to talk to because, they've done something that pissed me off, but I haven't told them. You don't tell them for a month, and all of a sudden, these things grow and grow and grow. And the more that people aren't able to kind of tell what they really feel or say, feel safe to disagree, feel safe to be honest, it just makes all of this friction in the organization, all these eggshells, continue to grow. Kind of summarize that in that leadership training in particular, I'd say all kind of learning, but leadership training in particular requires the organization to have a learning orientation, or at least some place where there's room to fail. But most company cultures are performance oriented, and that's kind of the fundamental mismatch. How do you create room for failure without, killing someone's career? And that's kind of on the organizational level. This is a little bit more on the personal level, but there's a lot of, I think, fundamentally why feedback is so difficult for individuals to receive. I'll share some of mine later, but it hurts. And Sheila Shaheen, kind of a well-regarded author on the subject, I think phrased it well, that feedback is at the intersection of two human needs. Fundamentally, we want to learn, we want to grow, we want to get smarter, but at the same time, we want to feel accepted and loved, and that the group respects us. And feedback kind of feels like it's the opposite of that. It feels like I'm being rejected by the group. It feels like they don't like me. And so how do you kind of design the organization and prep people to be able to deal with that reality? Which once again leads to this, where we all, very pleasant to stand in this line, hear how awesome we are. But how do you, and not only, it's not only hard for individuals to go stand in this line, it's really hard for that person too, because if you're the only one in the room that's like kind of telling people God's honest truth, like you seem like an asshole. So no one wants to seem like an asshole. So that's kind of the problem set. From the next kind of two sections, I'm going into how do we think about designing the organization to like make room for failure to kind of allow and support feedback. And the second section is more at the individual level. I hand drew this last night, kind of based on some iterative thinking that we've had. But the way that we think about our culture is having really, there are three legs to the feedback system. One is appreciation or recognition. The second is our programs to learn and grow, kind of room to fail. And the third are results, how you manage and reward results. From an appreciation point of view, I think most organizations reward, and if you look at their recognition schemes, it's very much about the quarterback, the one that scored the most, the one that got the highest score. We really focus on this idea of servant leadership, and those that are, even if they are not performing the best, they're doing the right behaviors that help other people succeed. So that's kind of a key insight there. In terms of develop and grow, we've talked about this prior, so I'm not going to go into it in depth, but this idea of a decision-making gym, where you need people to have practice projects, the ability to get critical feedback, and then the ability to recover from that, TPs, situational workshops, that kind of thing. The opposite of that, what I think does not work, are zero mistake cultures where mistakes are not tolerated, or this idea of ruinous empathy. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. The other thing that's important is how an organization thinks about results, and at the end of the day, who you promote, who you bonus, who you keep moving through the system. That people pick up whatever they're doing. That's what I need to do. I think the default way of doing that is very outcome based. I'm the best at doing my job. Our challenge, what we've changed internally, is to make it both outcome and what we call training. And I'll talk about that in a minute more. But it's that results still matter the most. At the end of the day, this is about performance. It's about getting the maximum performance out of yourself, your team, and the whole organization. But if you only reward today's performance, you're undershooting tomorrow's performance. So really what we look at is both how are you performing today, but also how are you doing training and putting yourself out there and growing such that you'll be the better person tomorrow. Because we'd rather invest in that person that's growing faster than the person that's executing today and doing well today, but will not likely do well in the future. Which leads to this, I think, a very key point that we've done this in a very kind of extreme way, but we're very conscious to separate evaluative feedback, what affects your bonus, promotion, salary, all that stuff, from developmental feedback. So developmental feedback is what you guys have all been experiencing for the past 2.5 days. But we do twice a year have contribution evaluation. So this does determine, this is the score. It's basically a reading of the score. How, if you're a salesperson, did you hit your sales quota? If you're an engineer, did you code the product? Did it get adopted? Did you get usage? So it's just it's based on getting results. At the end of the day, the whole organization dies if you don't get results. But that's only half of what we measure in contribution evaluation. So half is the score, kind of what you achieved. The other half is how much effort are you putting into training and developing yourself? Not even whether you've been successful at it, but as long as you are putting in strong effort, that's what we want. So we want people that are achieving results now and investing for the future. So we're looking for people that have both. The next thing we'd look for is people that maybe they don't have great results now but are investing. That's the next best. The third thing would be people that are achieving now but not investing. So if that makes sense. We value the investment more than the short-term results. Another question we've got a lot in terms of sort of organizational design is how do you start building feedback muscles within organizations? I don't think you're going to run a leadership 360 or a 10x kind of right off the bat. What is that ramp of actually getting people more comfortable with feedback? And we've seen this pattern work. Where level one is giving feedback on events. So the idea is, we have Academy. If you asked your colleagues to say for whatever events you have, just give feedback on the event. It's not about a person. It's not, you're not going to offend anybody. Just start writing about the event, whether it's your weekly meeting or whatever, to people in that habit. Level two is skill. So things like sales presentations or code reviews, or it's whatever's already happening in the organization, but having people give feedback on people's skill. So once again, it's less personal, it's less kind of offensive, but you're just kind of giving an evaluation of how do you think they're performing in from a skill point of view. Level three is a brief, which is what happened, kind of a backward-looking review of what happened. And so we use this a lot in business reviews. That do we hit our sales targets? Do we hit our usage targets? But it's not really going into kind of once again, it's about facts and figures and sort of less personal. Level 4 is we call a debrief, starting with culture and then with revenue. And the idea with a debrief, we got that term from the Navy. I think some of you are here. But the idea of that is that almost like because the Air Force is the same thing. You come back from a training sortie and you're doing a debrief with the team. You self-evaluate. This is, I think I did, on a scale of, I don't know what scale you use, but on a scale of 1 to 10, I did a 2, and this is why. And really, what we've found that practice to be so powerful because you're getting feedback and inviting feedback on your judgment. I think this is how I read the score. I did well or I did not. I did not do well, and my reasons why. And then it starts getting significantly more personal because you're actually exposing your own judgment calls, your own thought process, why you led or decided things in a certain way. And the highest level is doing the same thing, but really on your core work. I won't touch on this very briefly, but as part of the that feedback system, I think it is important that if you're going to get critical feedback, recognition matters. The more recognition that the organization has, the more confidence people have to give people critical truth because they know they're getting the positive stuff in some other way. But another aspect that's important in the gym is this ability to have people that are in the arena with you that can really give you help you make sense of the feedback and figure out how to action it and improve. So that's kind of on the organizational design level. The kind of next set of information is what we have learned about feedback, and really from a more personal level, because it is challenging to get critical feedback. And there's really three things going on in people's heads. One is fear of giving candid feedback. Second is fear of looking bad in front of your peers. And 3 is how do you own your own feedback and actually make it work for you as a tool? So problem number 1, fear of giving candid feedback. This was the ultimate PowerPoint skill I've ever displayed, somehow getting half my head there. This is what people think, that if I actually tell you what I'm really thinking, will I hurt your feelings? Am I being judgmental? Am I a hypocrite? Will I get in trouble? There's all sorts of social reasons, unless you're kind of psychopathic, you don't want to offend someone. So how do you get around that? From the kind of radical candor people, I really like this sort of view of the world, that if this axis is truth and kind of telling people exactly what you think, and this axis is showing care so they know they care about you, the sweet spot, you want to aim for radical candor. The other things that are probably most important is this idea of ruinous empathy, that's when people just tell you bullshit. Oh, that was awesome. God, you blew it. That happens a lot. That's probably the default of most organizations. They're ruinous empathy organizations. The other is you're telling someone the truth, but in a really asshole-ish way, and you're offending them. Our belief is this, that it is actually better to encourage people, the target is this, but to encourage people, especially at the beginning, it's better to get practice telling the truth and maybe offending them, because eventually you'll figure out how to do it right. But if you stay in this zone of soft pedaling everything, you'll never get skilled at delivering hard truth in an effective way. I love what Jim said, that cultures where everyone is nice are filled with inauthentic kindness. And that's really just another word of saying ruinous empathy. We're all being nice to each other, we're all being social, we're all been trained to do that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't help people. In fact, it hurts individuals and hurts organizations. I've been here for 18 years now, but prior to that I worked at a large bank, and there were people there that I think they had been there for 20 years with no one actually ever told them the truth. And so they just were stuck in these dead-end jobs, and if just someone told them, take a shower, smell, or they're obnoxious to work with. I mean, it's a whole range of stuff, but people it's not nice. It's not nice. They just let people suffer and suffer and suffer because you don't want to have the hard conversation. And especially the more people that are in your care, the more people that are in your command, it becomes a bigger responsibility. So we have a series of kind of lessons to kind of overcome these barriers. So lesson 1 was, we have a very simple habit. At the end of every meeting at NextJump virtually, I mean, typically we want at least 5 people or more. 10 is ideal. But if at any meeting of any size, we always leave 5 minutes for feedback. And the important thing is we want people to leave feedback right here, right now, not go back and do it. Because number one, if you allow people to go back and do it, like half of them just won't do it, you'll forget. The other half is your brain just starts thinking about, well, how do I say this nicely? How do I kind of soft pedal it? Like you will very quickly end up in ruinous empathy mode. And so it's much better to say, okay, everyone, not even 5 minutes, 2 minutes, like right now, pulse reaction, let us know what you're thinking. Another important point is to what we call normalize to a 2. When people start giving feedback, especially in a setting with people you don't know, so in our rating it's 1, 2, 3, 4. We've seen this with every partner that we've partnered with. When they first launch using our app, they give each other 4s all the time. And if you kind of read what they're writing, well, that was probably your worst presentation, but it's still, they're hitting a 4. People are just so impracticed at doing it. The way that we phrased it that we found to work is that we want a 2 to represent what you normally do. The intention of giving feedback is to give feedback that actually helps you improve. And so a 2 is what you normally do. So that should be most common. Anything above that, if you do something that's stronger, better, some kind of improvement that you want to signal, that's a 3 and a 4. If you tried something new and it kind of sucked, that's a 1. But really make 2 what that person actually does. And that also, by phrasing it that way, it reduces kind of the social pressure that people feel against being truthful. Because if you don't set it up that way, people are like, they just want to give each other 4s all the time. It's sort of baked into the way that we do it. And I guess I should have said this at the beginning. Part of what I'm going now is I'm taking you through a sort of a product data journey that we went over for the past 4 years and how our product has iterated. But I'm kind of sharing the underlying principles. Like it doesn't necessarily need to use our app to use this, but however you deal with or implement feedback, I think these principles apply. We have tried it a bunch of ways. What information is most useful to collect in terms of feedback? And we've come to this idea that you need both a numerical rating, but also free copy. Why both? I think the number one issue is that people are just so in practice at giving feedback. Like you either give kind of the SHIT sandwich, like I really like that summary results, good innovation, but overall the preso was hard to follow, and I think you lost a lot of people. And then if that has no number, is that a 1? Is that a 4? Like what is that? And it could be, maybe it was a 4, like it was the best they ever did, but they want to give them some indicator of how to do it better. But once again, the number just makes it very clear. This was an improvement or a deprovement, and then you're kind of giving the useful info. Another issue is that people tend to give very short kind of blow off answers. So we have a little bit of a character limit there. So if you try to do too short, it doesn't let you do it. But bottom line, the number's enough. If you just had numbers, it wasn't enough, and if you just had kind of copy or freeform text, it wasn't enough either. Second problem set is fear of looking bad in front of peers. This is a big one. Like you can feel like super naked if you give some presentation or I do a product launch and it goes badly. It's like embarrassing if everyone else is seeing it. The most effective thing that we've done is what I was talking about at the beginning, is we've redefined what bad is. So if you notice the way that we segment our segment feedback in particular, is that you're trending up, down, maintenance, or hiding. We've made these 2 buckets, which we consider not learning. You're not putting yourself out there. That's bad. What's good? Bad feedback, it hurts. There's no way to stop it from stinging. But we call that intentionally investment in loss. We call that, like, you're trying something new. We expect you to be doing bad. That's the price of tuition. And by just reinforcing that message a lot, that I want you to win at the end of the day. It's about performance. It's about the company winning. But I just want you on the playing field, because eventually you'll get there as long as you're out there trying. But if you're not playing at all, if you're playing it safe, that's a problem not only for you, but that's a problem for the enterprise, and we don't allow that. Kind of the embedded thing is I think by default people will, unless you set it up that negative feedback is valuable, and we as a kind of leadership value negative feedback, people will be afraid of it, and they won't take chances. The other thing we do is informate publicly. So those characterizations of people, whether you're hiding or whatnot. This was the first, we created a series of posters. This is sometime, I think, last year, where when we first started running this, we had a lot of hiders. And so we put this out next month, dramatically reduced. The other thing is that the system is constantly, not constantly, but monthly, kind of pinging users about what is the status of your feedback? Are you out there? Have you fallen off? It just, once again, keep putting information publicly to keep pushing people to have it in their minds to take a chance to get on the playing field, trying to learn. Lead with self-assessment. This comes into the debrief concept. So that's a picture of a growler, which we were totally influenced and liked out in Whidbey Island. The kind of the debrief process where the power of setting up a meeting where people begin it by self-evaluating, it actually makes, there's like a psychological thing in there that makes feedback less, fearful. Because I'm the one that's saying, I did great or I did badly. And I'm asking for really feedback on, is my self-assessment correct? If you don't set it up that way and people are just kind of getting it shoved in their face, that can be, especially at the beginning, very threatening. The kind of dynamic of that is that it puts the person in control. It's like, this is how I see the world, it's my sense of it, my understanding of the situation, and I want feedback on, do you think that is correct? Which is different than just, throwing someone in a room and throwing a bunch of feedback at them. Then problem set number 3, how to solicit feedback. It's like how to own it. It's a tool. And it is it's a learned skill to be able to get other people to tell you the truth and feel more comfortable doing that. We use this cartoon a lot, as you know. So make it easier for other people to tell you the truth. The reality is, this person probably doesn't even exist. Like, God did not make someone that's going to give you perfect, constructive criticism, exactly when you need it. You're super lucky. That would be like, no one has that. So it's our responsibility, each of our responsibility, to go out and seek it, to stand in the right line, but then learn how to ask for it in ways that are effective. The kind of the verbal technique is around, if I go into this meeting right now and say, you know what, I worked on this presentation, Greg and I, we spent the last 3 days, this is all that we did, we stayed up all night, I hope you like it. Please give me feedback. You're gonna get one thing. But if you said, actually we're iterating on this is what we're kind of our current state of knowledge, we're gonna be giving this again, at least in the next academy, but we actually give it all the time. And the more information you give us how to make this better, that will really improve us so we can improve. And so there's just ways you can verbally invite criticism and take control of it, that once again, it's just a learned skill, it's practice. Most of this just has to do with practice. Another thing that's, I think, very important here at NextJump is that the most useful feedback that I found and we found is that when it comes from an anonymous but from a known group. So, for example, this is a not known group, like we know each other, but we're not intimate with each other. Versus this is our leadership team, our MV21 team. The team here has been consistently giving me feedback for years, and I trust them, I know them, they know me. And the type of insight I get from them is, I think, very useful for me. Often in large public settings like this, people will be like, I love it, I hate it. It's a little bit all over the place, and it's hard to kind of make heads or tails of it. And so maybe the to-do out of this is that I think companies that we've worked with that have successfully implemented feedback, they've created teams of peers that are giving each other feedback consistently over time. In particular, this idea of peer feedback versus kind of manager or subordinate feedback. When it's peer feedback, it's like people that are they have a similar kind of role as you, even if maybe they're in a different group or whatever. But they understand kind of the stress that you're under. Whereas if you end up with situations where you're getting too much feedback from below or too much feedback from above, it's kind of like they don't understand my position, all this stuff. But if you have people that are more intimate with the way that your world works, it tends to be more powerful. Another interesting insight is frequency and quantity matters more. These are two histograms, or charts of, this is a kind of a 4-week period that we ran. So it's from, each cell represents a day in, I guess, March through April. And the depth of the color represents how much feedback a particular person is getting. And we took our top decile of performers versus our bottom decile of performers. And how does that look? The cool thing is that for the top performers, they had set up rituals where they were basically getting feedback every single week. So they're setting up something where they're consistently, frequently getting feedback. Where the bottom performers, the only feedback they got here, and that was a forced event. We forced people to do something. It kind of goes to this notion that if you take ownership of your feedback, you think of it as a tool to get better, that you do actually get better. But if you hide from it, if you're afraid of it, if you're not putting yourself out there, that at the end of the day leads to lower performance. Invest in the recovery process. I don't need to explain this because Charlie explained it this morning, but we put a lot of stock in this process of, especially when you try something and it doesn't work and you get a bunch of negative feedback, what do you do? So this was my equivalent of Charlie's, maybe not quite as bad, but from my last leadership 360 meeting. So I run, my leadership practice project is recruiting. And so one of the things that I'm working on is within my TP pair with Greg. Greg is the more kind of charismatic, assertive one. I'm the more thoughtful, correct decision one. And in our dance, I'm trying to, because this is a practice project, I'm trying to be the one that's more assertive, more out in front, and he's trying to be the one that's more sort of thoughtful and strategic. And we're having trouble with it. It's much harder than it seems. But this is my challenge. Basically, the feedback from my peers that theme basically came out. That still kind of Greg leading. You're not putting yourself out there the way that you said you would. But that's useful as it's a checkpoint. It's a score. It's from a known group that I know, has my best interest at heart, and that ultimately it's, this is the information I need to figure out how to do better over the next coming month. So I think summarizing that, there are kind of 10 things we talked about. I'm not going to go over this whole list, but we're sending you this deck. But I think these are in our, at least from a technology perspective, how we've built our feedback app. It's kind of incorporating these ideas and these notions in terms of giving feedback, looking bad, and owning your data. If I had to impart only one thing that you remember, I think it's this quote from the beginning, that getting a lot of feedback doesn't guarantee performance, but not getting feedback guarantees failure. And however, I think you kind of take forward a journey of kind of more feedback in the organization, I think that is probably the most useful thing, that if you can figure out how to incorporate that into the way that you operate, has the most ROI.